We'll start with the movies that are only hits, because it's 2025. The kind of movies that 10 or 15 years ago would have been wearing the word flop like a name tag. Back then, these titles would have belonged in the last video, the one about 2025 disasters. But streaming changed the math. Now Disney can basically buy a Disney movie from Disney for Disney Plus, somewhere in the 140 to 180 million range. Totally legal. Different corporate entities. And yes, it looks like taking money out of your left pocket and handing it to your right pocket, but hey, paperwork is paperwork, and the system still counts it. And it only looks ridiculous because 20 years ago, nobody was paying $150 million for a movie with meh audience scores that nobody wanted in theaters. And those movies weren't getting saved by DVD sales either. Streaming made everything fuzzier. Because if you look back, a movie like Van Helsing with those numbers didn't get a sequel. It got politely buried. Pacific Rim got a sequel, sure, but with half the budget and a totally different vibe. Today, a movie can pull the same theatrical box office, then get a nice extra 100 to 200 million dropped on it from a streaming deal, and suddenly it's a success. Like, congratulations, your flop got sponsored. And the first example is Tom Cruise on his latest mission. Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. It grossed $598 million. For almost any movie, that's a straight-up win. No excuses needed. But Tom Cruise managed to step on every single rake on the way to release. The kind where each one hits you in the face and then invoices you for it. First, production got slammed by the actors and writers' strikes, so filming had to shut down for months. Which is a great way to inflate the budget of an already expensive movie. Then they finally start back up, and they have to stop again for a few weeks. Why? Because of a submarine that cost $25 million. They were lowering it into the water on a special platform. The platform didn't handle the weight and sank along with the submarine. So they had to rebuild both the platform and the sub. And yeah, that's not a run to Home Depot situation. Then Tom Cruise decided he was going to fly the planes himself, which meant 100 training flights and then another 100 flights for the actual shoot. So something that could have cost $5 million with a stunt pilot ended up costing $20 million because Tom Cruise wanted it to be Tom Cruise. Whether that was worth it, feel free to decide. Bottom line, filming started mid-2023 and didn't wrap until late 2024. If you remove the shutdowns, the actual shoot was about 9 months. The final budget blew past $400 million. They could have tried to fix things with reshoots, but there weren't any. And the test screenings were amazing, at least according to director Christopher McQuarrie. He said everyone around him was basically fainting from excitement, while he felt like he'd finally made a genuine masterpiece. Out of that $400 million, Paramount managed to claw back around $70 million through insurance. They successfully argued the strike qualified as an insured event, so the studio's real cost landed around $330 million. And with that budget, the movie grossed almost $600 million. Now remember, studios usually take about 50% of the theatrical box office, so they're still in the red. And if you add marketing, they're in the red. But this is where streaming comes in, because Paramount has its own service too. Now let's jump to comic book movies. There are 2 of them sitting in a very similar situation to Cruise. And 2025 has been not a great year for comic book films, to put it politely. The difference is, with Mission Impossible, the problems were out in the open. With Captain America: Brave New World, the production is basically classified. Every leak, every rumor, the studio denied it all. Even the idea that the original director got pushed aside and the movie was reshot by someone else was never officially confirmed. Compare that to the Marvels, where director Nia DaCosta openly said, yeah, the experience was bad and the movie wasn't really hers. The director of the 4th Captain America, Julius Ona, has kept quiet and stuck to the official line that the film is his, which lets the studio say, minimal reshoots. Production budget, $180 million. Rumors say it went way past $300 million, but this movie is only on this list because we're using the studio's $180 million version. If it's actually over $300 million, no streaming deal is saving it. Unless someone paid like $400 million for it. And nobody ever reports numbers like that. As it stands, Captain America Brave New World grossed $415 million. If you add a roughly $150 million streaming deal on top of that, and you keep the budget at $180 million, then sure, it ends up profitable. Even if it feels a little creative accounting. Same story with Thunderbolts. Also a reported $180 million budget, but unlike Captain America, it didn't have production chaos, which makes the Captain America number look even funnier, because Captain America had constant reshoot photos popping up everywhere. Thunderbolts grossed $382 million on that $180 million budget. And for comparison, Alita Battle Angel cost $170 million and made $405 million. And we're still sitting here asking where the sequel is. Yet somehow Thunderbolts isn't considered a failure. The studio said it was happy. And again, if you toss in another $150 million from streaming, suddenly everything looks fine. There were successful comic book movies in 2025. One was the new Fantastic Four, and even here you kind of want to put air quotes around successful, because it ended its theatrical run with just a couple of dollars more than Ant-Man did back in 2015. Ant-Man cost $135 million and grossed $519 million. Fantastic Four cost $185 million and grossed $521 million. Adjusted for inflation, Ant-Man's budget today would basically be in that same $180 to $200 million zone, except its box office would probably be closer to $700 million, maybe more. So yeah, Fantastic Four broke even theatrically, but calling it a great result is tough. It's more like, we survived, barely. The biggest comic book movie of 2025 was James Gunn's Superman, which rebooted the DC universe. Warner Brothers already called it a success and the start of a bright new future. Superman ended the year in 10th place worldwide. Yes, the top-grossing comic book movie of the year is only 10th overall. If we ignore the COVID year of 2020, the last time comic book movies were at this level, or lower, was 2011. That was the year we had the Avengers and X-Men First Class. After that, the worst result was Venom Let There Be Carnage in the still COVID 2021 year, which landed 7th overall. The new Superman grossed $617 million on a $225 million budget. Man of Steel, which was considered a disappointment back in 2013, grossed $670 million on basically the same budget. So the new Superman is also a modest win, but it is still a win. Last time after Man of Steel, Warner Brothers started reworking the whole universe, and Man of Steel 2 basically evaporated and turned into Batman versus Superman. A lot of people later called that a huge mistake. This time, Warner Brothers is probably trying to correct that, and they don't seem interested in changing course. Supergirl comes out this year, we'll see how that goes. Unlike comic book movies, horror is doing just fine. The first half of the year, with the flops of Wolfman and Megan 2.0, made everyone sweat a little, but the second half fixed the mood fast. There were a lot of big horror hits in 2025. The top-grossing one was The Conjuring 4: The Last Rites, $494 million on a $55 million budget. And of course, The Last Rites instantly became not the last one. A spin-off and a prequel have already announced. Because when final anything makes that much money, Hollywood takes it as a challenge. Sinners also did great. Rural Vampires pulled in $368 million on a $90 million budget. Final Destination Bloodlines became the highest-grossing film in its franchise. Back when it was announced in 2019, it was supposed to be a reboot. But while the script was being worked on, plans shifted, and it ended up as a continuation. It grossed $315 million on a $50 million budget. So no, we won't be waiting another 10 years for the next one. Weapons, directed by Zach Kreger, also crushed it. $269 million on a $35 million budget. The Five Nights at Freddy's sequel dipped compared to the first movie, but $232 million on a $51 million budget is still a great result. The return of the 28 Days Later franchise didn't hit as hard as people expected, though. 28 Years Later made $151 million on a $60 million budget. The trailer was the second most viewed horror trailer ever, only the first It was bigger. and the first week suggested it might finish around 250 million, but in week 2 it basically flatlined with record-level drops. So yeah, fine, but with a weird smell. The sequel is already done. They shot the films back-to-back, and 28 years later, The Bone Temple is already being rolled into theaters. A third movie is planned too, but with these numbers, that one will probably depend on how The Bone Temple performs. And a few other horror titles, like The Monkey and The Black Phone 2, also did really well. The one thing horror still can't do is crack the year-end top 10. Probably just a smaller overall audience. 9th place on the year's worldwide box office list goes to Brad Pitt and F1. And basically nobody saw this coming. The expectation was, nice try, Brad. People were forecasting something like a 200 to 300 million finish, which would have put it in flop territory. Instead, F1 pulled in 631 million. But, and this is the same but we had with Captain America Brave New World, the budget is a moving target. Depending on who you ask, it's anywhere from 200 million to 300 million. The movie got pushed back an entire year and went through major reshoots. And that delay caused a sponsor domino effect. Some sponsors bailed, others changed branding and designs. You can't release a new season of Formula One movie with last season's look, so unofficially, that's how the budget allegedly floated up toward 300 million. Officially, producer Jerry Bruckheimer says they actually made a ton of money off sponsor deals, like over $100 million just from ad placements inside the film, which honestly turns F1 into something we've seen before. The Bond model. In Bond movies, the watches, suits, cars, none of that is there because it looks cool. It's there because someone paid. Bond is basically the most expensive commercial in film history, and the F1 team claims they pulled off the same trick with how much paid branding is in the frame. So if we go with the official budget of 200 million, and the box office is 631 million, then yeah, Brad Pitt is doing just fine. 8th place goes to the live-action How to Train Your Dragon. They basically just remade the 2010 animated movie almost shot for shot. And audiences were like, yep, that works. Budget 150 million. Box office 637 million. 7th place belongs to anime, Demon Slayer Infinity Castle. It's a continuation of a massively successful series and it performed like it. 781 million worldwide on a 20 million budget. That is absurdly efficient. 6th place goes to Dinosaurs and Scarlett Johansson, Jurassic World Rebirth. It made 870 million. The new dinosaurs cost 225 million. A sequel is already announced because, of course it is. Somewhere around this spot last year sat the musical Wicked. They split it into 2 parts. Part 1 dropped at the end of 2024, Part 2 at the end of 2025. The first film made 758 million. Part 2 isn't a flop, not even close. Each half cost 150 million, and the second film made 522 million. But the drop is real. Wicked for Good is still successful. It's just one of those successes where the numbers work, but something still feels a little off. Like it technically passed the test, but the teacher is still concerned. 5th place goes to Minecraft, which stopped just short of the $1 billion line. This is one of those movies where people were penciling in 1 billion years before it came out. The bigger question is, why did it take so long to adapt it? Minecraft is literally the best-selling video game in history. Warner Brothers released it, and it made 958 million on a 150 million budget. And now we enter the $1 billion zone, the land of kids' movies and blue people. 4th place is the live-action Lilo and Stitch. The original 2002 animated movie wasn't some insane box office monster. It made 273 million on an 80 million budget. But over the years, it's become a Disney money printing machine. So in 2025, they finally remade it, and the result made 1.039 billion on a 100 million budget. 3rd place in 2025 is the 3rd round of Blue People, Avatar, Fire, and Ash. It came out just 2 weeks before the end of the year, and it's still in theaters, so in theory, it could climb to second place. But one thing is already clear. It's not touching the sequel's final total. The drop is coming. We just don't know how big it'll be. No amount of legs is getting it back up to part 2. For context, the first Avatar made $2.923 billion, still the biggest box office total in history. The sequel in 2022 made $2.320 billion, which is the third all-time. Right now, the third film is sitting at $1.106 billion on a $400 million budget. It's absolutely going to pass $1.5 billion. The only question is how far past that it goes. That's why it's placed third here. It might not reach the second. We'll know in about a month. A lot of family movies managed to break even in 2025. Dogman made $145 million on a $40 million budget. Freakier Friday made $153 million on a $42 million budget. They dropped that sequel 22 years after the original, and audiences showed up. And later, people are going to ask again, why does awful Hollywood keep feeding us sequels, prequels, and remakes? Well, because this is what people buy. The original Elio completely flopped, while Freakier Friday didn't. Even though Elio has better audience scores, viewers vote with their wallets, and they keep voting for sequels. The Bad Guys 2 also did fine, $241 million on an $80 million budget. But DreamWorks overall is clearly not living in its old era anymore. They used to go head-to-head with Disney. Now their movies are basically surviving in the basement of the leaderboard. Dogman and The Bad Guys. 2 broke even, sure, but $153 million and $241 million don't even exist in the same universe as Zootopia 2, which has made $1.620 billion. And it's still playing, so it'll go higher. Yes, Zootopia 2 is second place in 2025, and it's on track to become the highest-grossing animated film in Disney history. Right now, the top spot is still Inside Out 2, but with Zootopia 2 still in theaters, it should catch it. The gap is already under $100 million. The budget for Zootopia 2 is $150 million. And remember, in the 2025 flops video, Disney had 3 major box office disasters: Elio, Snow White, and Tron Ares. Together, those cost them something like $500 to $600 million. Meanwhile, the theatrical take Disney gets from Zootopia 2 alone will be $600 to $700 million. And Lilo and Stitch and the Blue People are also Disney projects. So yeah, Disney could afford 3 or 4 more flops like that and still be comfortably profitable, even before you count merch revenue from Lilo and Stitch. Honestly, Disney could probably flop all year and still be wildly up, because toys and everything else do the real heavy lifting. Their biggest money comes from the parks, then merch, and only after that the movies. Even if Marvel decided to die in theaters, Disney wouldn't feel it right away, which is why nobody is panicking and nobody is changing course. Before we get to first place, we should also talk about the poor genres, comedies and action movies. 2025 was brutal for them. The top-grossing comedies, if we don't count family stuff like Freakier Friday, were The Naked Gun and Anaconda. The Naked Gun made $102 million on a $42 million budget. Anaconda made $110 million on a $40 million budget. Not exactly a victory lap, but comedy is basically a dead theatrical genre right now, so people are counting pennies and calling it a day. Action movies did even worse. Comedy and action both basically moved to streaming. They crank them out by the dozen over there, and apparently someone watches them. In theaters, it's ugly. You have one Tom Cruise doing $600 million, and everyone else can't even crack $100 million. Ballerina did a bit better, but $137 million on a $90 million budget doesn't qualify as successful. Relatively successful. Jason Statham's A Working Man, $92 million on a $40 million budget. And if we're talking great box office for the budget, you can also mention Materialists and The Housemaid. Materialists made $105 million on a $20 million budget. The Housemaid made $134 million on a $35 million budget. And it's still in theaters, so it might push up toward $200 million. Now, first place in 2025 goes to the Chinese animated film Ne Zha 2. The first one, back in 2019, made $726 million in China alone. The 2025 sequel made $2.110 billion in China. Then it added another roughly $100 million from the rest of the world. $2.1 billion in a single country is obviously an all-time record. And because that number is so insane, people immediately started side-eyeing it. But there's no proof of manipulation. The simplest explanation is that it was a true local phenomenon. For comparison, The Force Awakens made $936 million in the US alone. And if you compare populations, about 330 million versus 1.5 billion. Ne Zha was actually seen by a smaller percentage of the country than The Force Awakens was in the US. The budget for Ne Zha 2 was $80 million, and yes, a third film is already announced. It probably won't hit the sequel's box office. That event movie lightning doesn't strike on schedule. But Ne Zha 3 is almost guaranteed to show up in the top grossing list in 2027 or 2028. Just probably not in first place. And that's probably it for today. That was Frameback. See you on the next Rewind.